It looks like I should go buy a fragrance called Sea Breeze after the movie.
It looks like Old Spice commercials. I can just imagine him being on a horse.
Look at your man, now look at me. I'm Odysseus. Now look at my horse. Welcome back to Adaptive Difficulty, where we ask and answer the age-old question. Ancient Greek myths aren't movies, but what if they could be?
This week, we are discussing Christopher Nolan's 2026 new release, The Odyssey, starring Matt Damon, Tom Holland, Anne Hathaway, and many more.
Yes, and sort of in our continuing Odyssey book club, we are up to books 9 through 16. So I think we'll probably start and mostly talk about the movie itself, but we'll also drop in some of our thoughts specifically on that section of The Odyssey.
Because that section of The Odyssey is really the main bulk that people know, because it's the one with Odysseus' travels, getting back to Ithaca.
Yeah, I think we timed it well, because we basically read the part that the movie was, predictably. Although I do think it did a better job of portraying the importance of the home life and the stuff that happens there than a lot of adaptations do. So we can get into that.
I was very happy to see that they were giving actually time and space for Penelope and Telemachus' character. I wasn't always a fan of some of the dialogue and some of the interactions they had with each other and the suitors and whatnot, but overall I'm happy that they included that part.
Yeah. So one of the big things, just talking the movie as a movie with it, is you mentioned that you saw this in a pretty tiny theater with only 2 screens, so I have to imagine it was not in IMAX.
No, it was not.
Okay.
The closest IMAX to me was 2.5 hours away.
No, I think they were saving the IMAX screen next door for Minions and Monsters, right?
Oh yeah, that's true. The true necessary experience. Where do you stand? Did you see it in IMAX?
No, I just saw it in a normal widescreen theater. I have seen movies in IMAX 70mm before. I saw Oppenheimer that way, and both Dunes, and One Battle After Another. So I do it, or did do it, relatively frequently, but the nearest IMAX theater to me there's 2 of them, both about 2 hours away. So now that I have a baby, that's just not a feasible option, but I used to do it before I had one. I think the movie looks perfectly fine in widescreen. People get mad about, you're not getting the whole picture because they filmed more of it for IMAX. But the thing about IMAX is they're not expecting you to see the whole thing because the screen is so huge. It's just more to be take up your full vision and be more immersive. And that wouldn't make sense on a normal movie theater screen. So I think people need to just calm down. Whatever theater you see it in is fine.
No, Christopher Nolan hates poor people who can't travel and go see IMAX.
Yeah, I definitely think that's an experience worth doing if you're interested in it. I've had fun when I have done it, but I just wouldn't lose any sleep over it.
Yeah, I don't really ever watch movies in IMAX because I don't live anywhere near an IMAX theater, and they should make more of them, or at least capable of doing digital IMAX.
I'm surprised there's not more IMAX, especially IMAXs that can project film, than there were when Oppenheimer released. I would have thought that was a big enough phenomenon that at least 1 or 2 would have cropped up, but I don't think there really have been.
Well, they're just super expensive.
Well, yeah, but they make a lot of money. Going into the actual movie that we saw, general thoughts first, I guess, most general thoughts.
Most general thoughts, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I probably would go see it again, and it's a 3-hour movie, and so that's high praise for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's a lot to chew on and think about. It's not just that I liked it, but I think seeing it again would be rewarding because I would be able to have thought about it and then confirm or recontextualize some of those thoughts in a way that feels like I might need to. It's pretty dense.
I'm very happy that my prediction was closer to coming true than your prediction was.
Which prediction are you talking about?
For me, I'm talking about the bathing in oil scene. We got one of those. I said 3, but we got one of them. And then you said this scene about Antinous' character potentially sleeping with Penelope and it being a nightmare for Odysseus.
Right. The closest I got to that was leaning in for a kiss, but that was reality. But Travis Scott did sort of rap.
I feels like I'm stretching it to give it to you, Josh.
Okay, so here's what I'll say. He did not play Demodocus, which was the prediction, or Demonicus, or however it'd be called. I had to look up his name because he either hasn't come up in the Odyssey yet, or his name is passed over very quickly. But he's Phemius, who is the poet of the suitors, and he serves them reluctantly. If he said all of his lines faster, they would be a rap, but I guess that's true of all recited poetry, so I guess you can't give it to me.
Yeah. He does show up later, because I have a selection of summaries from each of the books by Duke University.
This is not a unique thought to me, so I don't want to like take overly credit for it, but his role, his stunt casting is deliberately to say recited verse poetry is now rap in the modern day.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'll give you that much.
There's a spiritual victory there. Okay, so we both liked it, and we both were maybe 50% right if you combine our records on things that would happen.
We'll add it up on the chalkboard.
Oh, and it was nonlinear, which I think we technically made a prediction of, but was also a given.
Yeah. Can Christopher Nolan tell a movie in one direction? I don't think he can.
No, I think the Batman movies are the closest he gets, and even those aren't 100%. So do you have any more ideas about the opening before we're seeing them on their journey? Because we spend quite a bit of time at the opening just with Telemachus, and Eumaeus shows up earlier in this version, and Antinous, who's Robert Pattinson.
Well, it's setting up a lot about Telemachus' character, some of which I find weird for various reasons, and we can get more to it as we get to the end. But like the idea of having to be willing to take an attack in order to destroy your opponent feels like it's setting up to be a good character moment for him, and it does come back later, but it just feels very weird in the context of what Telemachus was really trying to do in the Odyssey itself.
Expand on that.
I guess it comes down into it being part of him having to grow up and learn how to do things, but the whole training sequence with Mentor and Eumaeus and Telemachus, it just doesn't feel like the kind of thing that I would expect to see in a lot of adaptations of the Odyssey.
In your mind, what's the like focus of his growth in the actual poem versus what we're getting in the movie?
I think in terms of the actual poem, it's there to be a matter of how does one become a good Greek adult male, and kind of being brought into that kind of gift exchange economy where he's going back and forth and getting to know all these people and getting to be familiar with like the culture and the history. That doesn't really happen a lot in the movie version. Like he goes to Menelaus' kingdom, and I think there's like some mention of gifts, but like there's no like real exchange of gifts. So that like part of what's happening in the Odyssey is like just not present.
So yeah, this is one of my big overall questions, is this idea of gift exchange and hospitality that is so omnipresent in the poem is sort of present in the movie, but they reduce it down to the phrase Zeus's law, which the word in actual Greek would have been xenia. So they did have a one-word term for it. But did you find that convincing, or is it kind of too convenient?
It doesn't strike me as too convenient. I think it's more of an importance of how the more mythological aspects of Nolan's Odyssey works, because the gods are relatively absent from Nolan's version. They're talked about, but we don't really see any of them, barring Athena, and I have thoughts about that one.
Right. We'll get to that because that's definitely late game spoilers.
But like Circe, the witch, is very much human. Calypso's in this weird in-between spot where she doesn't seem very godlike, but she also doesn't seem very human. But you hear about Zeus, you hear about Poseidon, but you don't like see them. They're not like characters in the story.
Right. And the opening of the movie says it is a time of apparent magic, which I think must be a deliberate double meaning, because there's both, apparent magic as in it seems that it may be magic, but is it? This movie allows for the idea of maybe it's an interpretation of events that says there's gods, behind everything, but not really. But also a time of apparent magic as in magic that is apparent. Magical things are happening and they appear to us.
It is interesting to make the gods dubiously existing, but still have, and like, of course you have to have the Cyclops, but you still have these mythological monsters that exist.
Right. There's definitely stuff that is unambiguously magical, unless you want to take a tack of, well, all the truly magical stuff only happens when Odysseus is narrating, and maybe he is either misremembering or fancifying. To me, that feels like a step too far, even for how the movie's portraying it.
Yeah, it doesn't really strike me as being in line with Odysseus' character in other parts for him to be kind of grandiose or trying to like self-acclaim himself.
Well, definitely in the poem he would be, but you don't think he's that way in the movie?
No, I think this is a far less boastful, delighted Odysseus. Like Odysseus in the poem is like reveling in like his intelligence and how he's outsmarting everything, often resulting in him immediately backfiring on himself whenever he tells like Polyphemus the name.
Yeah, of course he's super strong and epic warrior and everything in the book too, but people say he's a trickster, almost impish, in some ways, in like how he goes through the world in the poem. poem. But I think this Odysseus is much more consciously the Odysseus from the Iliad, who's a war veteran, and sort of emphasizing that aspect of his backstory very deliberately.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think the Trojan War overshadows this Odysseus in a way that I think original poem version, it doesn't.
Right. I don't know if you have read the Iliad or know the general plot. I mentioned last episode, I read it a couple of years ago, and Odysseus in that is basically a jock. Like, he's not a main character, but anytime he comes up, he is just crushing it, killing all the most Trojans or whatever. So the Odysseus of the Odyssey, and there's probably classic scholars who would take issue with it. I mean, everything we're saying, but especially what I'm saying. He does kind of feel like a separate character because he suddenly gains this trickster side and this sort of reminiscing side that you don't get from not having him be the focus of the first book. I also, as I was reading, made a note. There's a line, at least in the translation I read, where he mentions feeling lost since he first followed Agamemnon to Troy.
I feel like I recall that as well.
And I read that and noted it before I saw the movie, so props to me for that, because I thought that was such an interesting line because it specifically says he's felt lost ever since he even chose to go to the war, not just afterwards when he has been truly lost. It made me start thinking of the Odyssey as sort of this like recontextualizing reflection on the Iliad, and that is even more than the poem. That kind of is where the movie is going with the character. So
I'm pretty sure I said on the last Odyssey episode that I also saw the Odyssey, and I've not read the Iliad. I just kind of know the general plot, and I guess I've read Song of Achilles, which is not the same thing. But this element of recontextualizing what it means to be in war, and there's a war on the home front and having to deal with that. So I definitely kind of agree that the Odyssey is a kind of reckoning with the kind of war of the Iliad.
Right. So we kind of talked about the opening, and I guess we can sort of go through the different events from Odysseus's journey. How were we feeling about the Cyclops?
I love the Cyclops' design. I got serious Pale Man energy from Pan's Labyrinth, just in kind of how he looks and everything.
Oh, yeah.
I am incredibly interested and maybe disappointed that the nobody part is not in this movie and they don't talk to the Cyclops at all. Because to me, it feels like that's the part in the Odyssey that everyone points to of like Odysseus being smart and outwitting his opponent and it coming back to bite him in the face when he's arrogant. And you just don't have that in this one.
Yeah, I watched an interview actually before I saw the movie. Christopher Nolan was on The Daily Show. It was clear that Jon Stewart had seen the movie also, and he sort of tried to say it in code, but was like, there's a certain scene where a certain word doesn't come up, and it was obvious that that was what they were talking about, so I knew not to expect it. And in that interview, Nolan was basically like, it's a pun, it was too silly, what do you want me to do? I couldn't figure out how to crack it for the movie, which is kind of a trap of his own making, because he's the one that makes movies with such a grounded and serious tone. You could do the Odyssey a different way. Not that it's a problem that he chose his way to do it. But yeah, all you really get is him taunting the Cyclops afterwards, which causes him to toss all the rocks at their ship. So you do still have his arrogance. You just don't get his cleverness, which I think is pretty much consistent with how he's portrayed throughout the movie.
Yeah. Even just having the conversation with the Cyclops and getting him to drink a bunch of wine to get him to go to sleep would have been enough to kind of establish his intelligence. Because he clearly points out that there's an issue that they have to solve with the door being closed. So there is still that part. But then the plan just kind of happens, and I feel like you need a little bit more kind of build up to kind of fully establish that for somebody.
Right. And then from there, I guess the next big encounter would be the Lestrygonians.
Okay, are these the tree people?
They see the kid.
Okay, yeah.
Who's like the size of a full-grown person, and then all the huge warriors come out.
Is this in the Odyssey?
They're the giants.
Because
it is.
Okay, because I don't recall that moment, and everyone that I've talked to is like, I don't recall that in the Odyssey either, because it felt very weird.
Let me find, I remember reading it. They're called the Lestrygonians. It's not one of the longer, because you read it and like the Cyclops takes a fair bit of time, but then like the Lotus Eaters are literally one paragraph. So some of this stuff just is not as present as you think it would be. Let's see. That's the introduction.
Oh, it's in book 10.
Yeah. They just sort of they're huge and they attack. The one thing I've seen people point out is that they're wearing like steel armor, which would not have been available at the time of the movie. And of course, people have made a lot of hay about the movie not being 100% materially accurate, but I think it is relevant here thematically because they're so shiny and huge, like it's very obvious in the visuals. I wonder if maybe that's a sense of just we're visiting this land we don't know about and they're somehow more advanced than us and there's just like nothing we can do to bridge that gap with them.
Yeah, because I didn't remember the Lestrygonians, that's kind of what I was thinking of in terms of the context of what the themes of this movie are and how the ending kind of ends and the implications. I was just like, why did he add this weird scene? But I guess if it's in there, it doesn't make it better, doesn't make it worse. I guess it's just in there. But I had a similar thought process of this is a world that they're just utterly unable to kind of navigate. And I think this ties into how I feel about the decision to not have gods as characters, really, where there is no normalizing force for the Greeks. They can't do anything. There's no higher power. They're just kind of thrown into kind of chaos.
Right. And then from there, we go to, I guess it would be Circe next.
Yeah.
And she, maybe not the whole sequence, but definitely the scene of her turning the men into pigs might be my favorite visual scene from the whole movie.
Of the people I've talked to, they were all like, yes, probably the most graphic. I honestly think the creepiest part of this movie, while I think the Cyclops is creepy and kind of scary, watching them freaking out, continuously eating while crying, while their friends are being turned into pigs, is just so utterly horrifying that I was like, ooh, this is just kind of creepy.
Yeah, and for anyone who for some reason is listening to this but has not seen the movie, she turns the men into pigs by forcefully sculpting them, shoving her hand down their throat and dragging their chins, pointing them and everything. Yeah, I just thought it was so cool. You could almost feel Christopher Nolan's mind working on how do I make this a cinematic image and coming up with that as the answer. But the other thing is that this Circe, because in the book, book/poem, she turns the men into pigs and is like, Odysseus, you must sleep with me to free them. She's like a horny trickster. In this, she immediately starts with, running away in fear from the men and saying, you would rape me and attack me. You're men from war. That's what you do. Even when she mentions it to Odysseus, he doesn't really say she's wrong because she's not. Poem says there are scenes where there's blink and you miss it lines, but it's like, well, then we went to this town and we took some women and then we went on. That is definitely something that's implied and happening. And when they defeat Troy, they all take concubines. Like Odysseus did that with one of the major Trojans' wives, I believe. So it was interesting to reframe her that way.
Have you read the Madeline Miller Circe novel?
I'm aware of it, and my wife is like halfway through reading it, but no, I have not.
It's been a long time, but I feel like I distinctly recall part of her rationale or kind of rationalization in that book is the threat of rape to a degree. I don't know how I feel about it, and I was talking to several people, and one of the persons, she was like, it feels very half-assed from Nolan in terms of presenting the plight of women and the status of women and the empowerment of women, when the only two real characters that exist are, where this is brought up, is with Circe, and then you have that line later in Penelope whenever she's yelling at Telemachus, I've been queen for 20 years, but they just want a king to sit on the throne. It was probably my least favorite part of the film because it felt very out of character for Penelope, but also felt very out of character for just the tone of the movie. But what she brought up was there's a whole lot of sanitizing the sacking of Troy, where all of that's happening is people are being murdered in the street and not that any of the women are being raped.
I think it would have been too much in a modern 2026 movie to actually show that. It's just not something you show in movies unless you really have a significant reason to. I feel like as a theme, it does permeate the movie because I'll just go ahead and say it. The big thing we've been alluding to is that at the end, he has this whole flashback about his regrets of the end of the Trojan War because he feels it's deceitful. It wasn't within the law of Zeus to use the horse. And then the big image from that is they capture Zendaya's character, who is sort of ambiguously Athena, and decapitate her. So yes, again, it's not actually sexual violence, but I feel the idea of it is still permeating all of that guilt and those images.
I mean, I agree that the sexual violence isn't something that you put into the movies nowadays, but she was just kind of annoyed that it is kind of there, but it's also not there. And she was accusing him of wanting to have his cake and eat it too.
I guess I can see that argument, but I guess I feel like it is so, like, even if there aren't that many characters that it directly applies to, it is informing so much of what's happening the entire time that it's clearly not being dropped or forgotten as a theme throughout the runtime. But I would maybe have to watch it again to have a more solid answer on that.
Yeah.
But the overall point I was trying to arrive at is I think that helps with the visual because what she is doing to turn them into pigs is so invasive. Mm-hmm. It almost reminds me of how Alien works, where it's sort of this alien attack that is so visually reminiscent of rape.
Yeah.
With like shoving things down their throats and all that. So I do think the visual and the theme he's added there work together for what he's going with, at least for the runtime of that scene, if not the whole movie.
I hadn't thought about the alien connection, but I guess you are right. Interesting. Since we've already talked about the twist, is she supposed to actually just be Athena, or is she a guilty memory that's taken form?
I think you could see it either way. I think it's either we killed this innocent woman and she is now my memory that represents this ultimate failure, or we killed this innocent woman and now Athena takes her form to remind me of that failure and guide me. I don't think the movie answers that decisively.
I was just thinking about it in the context of what does it mean when none of the other gods are present, but Athena supposedly is.
Yeah, I guess that's why you might lean towards it being more of a figment, but I don't know. I feel like maybe it's really honestly just that, that gives a thematically coherent reason to have Athena on screen as a person, and it may have just felt hard to portray Poseidon with like a body in a convincing way.
Yeah, I suppose that makes sense.
Because I feel like the gods are clearly, to me, I think Nolan is saying they are in this story real because, for example, when Odysseus decides to go home, Calypso just convinces him to, get on a raft and want it enough, and then he weathers a storm and makes it there. There's not a god helped him get home way of interpreting that event.
I mean, we don't know how far this Calypso's island is from Ithaca, I suppose. But yeah, I can kind of see that.
Well, I would assume the movie's not implying actually he was like 50 feet away and just, just had to try.
Some people never look past their end of their nose, especially when they've been eating the lotus flowers.
And if it was trying to I think there would have been a shot to convey it.
That's probably true. I definitely think Odysseus sees her as Athena, because I think that they're all interpreting these signs and visions as part of the gods.
Yeah. And there are lines in the poem itself that say it is not easy for everyone to visualize the gods, or like the gods do not appear equally to everybody. So that is consistent with how Odysseus sees a god in this one image that's specific to him, but that's not necessarily how we, if we were there, would experience the gods. We would experience them as a sea storm that Poseidon caused instead. So Circe tells them how to go to Hades, or that they need to go to Hades. What did we think about Hades?
On a visual level, it just felt a little too bright to be Hades. In most adaptations, Hades gets to be kind of dark and gloomy, which is not true for all of Hades.
Yeah.
But it felt a little bright. I will say, I love the Tiresias goblin that just kind of crawled out of the ground and just stayed there half sunk. That's terrifying. Like, I could imagine that crawling out underneath the bed and scaring a child. So I liked his design. I liked his half veil.
Yeah. I thought each of the individual actors who gave the shades, quote unquote, monologues or lines did really well during that scene. It was unnerving and eerie. I missed in the poem, one thing I thought was kind of fun is he goes through like a checklist of all the other Greek myths, and Ajax was there and Oedipus was there next to his mom. I was reading it and I was like, this is like end game for Greek myths.
Which, I mean, I guess it's what it's trying to be, and it would have really drugged down the movie if he was just like, let me go count everybody. Like, here's Ajax.
No, they should have stopped the movie dead and been like, here's Oedipus and you don't want to know what happened.
Yeah.
That could have only improved it.
I suppose, what do you think of Elliot Page's character in this movie? Because he's playing a character that is a side character that is mentioned but is never really given that much importance.
Yeah, he's playing Sinon, who in the movie anyway is the one left behind outside of the horse to offer it as a gift. And I think this is one of the big flaws of the movie, because I've seen multiple people discuss this and not agree on what the situation was. But my understanding is that Antinous, Robert Pattinson's character, draws the short straw that says he has to go to war, but convinces Sinon to trade with him. And then for whatever reason, Odysseus notices, but enforces the swap. That is the part that I did not really catch. Why?
I think it was one of those things where I think the implication is that it was maybe not standard practice, but common practice to buy your way out of having to go to war. I believe the implication is that Antinous was supposed to go out and care for Sinon's father, and that's why Sinon's real upset, because his father died on the street begging for scraps of food. So he was betrayed in that sense. I mean, I do think that scene is a little confusing in terms of how it's shot and how it's kind of the information is presented to you. I could rationalize it as I was watching it, but it was a little jarring at first, being like, okay, what is actually happening in this moment?
Well, I've just seen multiple people think that it was the other way around, where Sinon was originally not going to go. No, Sinon originally drew the short straw, and then they tried to swap that. And to me, it's just such a load-bearing backstory for the way he's telling this story emotionally, that everyone should agree after seeing it what happened.
Although we get that shot 2 times. The first time is when Antinous is telling Telemachus about it, right?
Maybe. So you're saying there might be some unreliable
narration kind of happening? Yeah.
At least not direct. But yeah, so Sinon should not have gone to the war, but he did because of Antinous. He survives the war, but then dies as the offerer of the Trojan horse, and then comes back as the shade and says, give Antinous his shame. Here's the lot he drew that he should have gone to war and died with. Narratively, he's kind of representing, because we first see him as a little kid, so he represents the innocence that you lose when you send men into war.
I also think it does a fair amount for Odysseus' character because they don't tell Sinon that they're in the horse, and so he dies not knowing anything. And he's real upset about that. He's like, why didn't you trust me? And Odysseus is like, I needed you to believe it. I didn't need you to pretend to believe it because we would have all died at that point. So there is an element of, I guess it kind of stands in for kind of all the other points when Odysseus is doing a shitty thing because he's arrogant or problematic.
This Odysseus is less of a trickster, and he's more someone who lies to his underlings to get the job done for what he can tell himself is the greater good, but often leads directly to their deaths. So that's the most prominent example. But there's also a scene when they sail through Scylla and Charybdis. He doesn't tell them about Charybdis. He says, well, we've got to steer that way, away from the whirlpool, and leaves out, oh, and there's a huge monster that'll snatch up, 5 of us along the way.
I thought it was that he didn't tell them about Scylla because he was going to drive them into the whirlpool, and he wanted them to mutiny and pull towards the rocks because that's where they had to go, but he wasn't going to tell them about the monster.
Is Scylla the monster and Charybdis the whirlpool?
Charybdis is the whirlpool.
Then that is what I meant to say. I just gave them the wrong names.
I was just clarifying. I didn't want us to get attacked by fanboys being like, you didn't watch the film.
Well, Nolan fanboys and classic scholars are all famously level-headed, so we should be fine.
Yeah, it's that moment that really sets the tone. I mean, I will say, Odysseus is kind of right in a lot of ways because they make terrible decisions all the time. And I know it's somewhat unfair for them because they're battling against fate and being told that they're going to eat the cattle on the island of Helios. And they eventually do, but it's after like several weeks or months of not really eating anything and like running out of food. And Odysseus is mad at them. And Athena's there and is like, why are you so upset about this? They're not your responsibility. They chose their own fate. And he's like, I was there to get them home safe. So I don't know.
Well, I'm kind of thinking about this out loud here, but because the line that they emphasize when he goes and finds them, he's like, do you think the sun god can't tell that you're eating the cow in a pit instead of on the surface? And they say, well, we thought you wouldn't see. So it's sort of this like, maybe if he had been a more upfront and trusting person to begin with, then they would have done this more, like they would have behaved more in the open and he could have prevented it from happening at all. But instead, the way he lives his life and the way he leads his men leads to a culture of secrecy.
Does this feel like it's a direct effect of the result of the Trojan War, where he feels guilty about being deceiving and so he's trying to justify it? Because I feel like we get a couple of flashbacks while they're still fighting the war and he seems fairly straightforward and not overly deceptive, which they're very small scenes, so there's not going to be a whole lot there. And I wonder if the implication is, because this is like the broader implication for all of Greece, is that the Trojan War ruined who they were as people, and so they're coming back as like marauders or like the people from the sea that are going to bring on the Greek Dark Age. I wonder if this is his way of falling out of that kind of heroic style from before the Trojan War, where he's now kind of duplicitous and scheming, and he's doing it for good reasons, or what he thinks is good reasons, but he did the Trojan horse for good reasons, or what he thought were for good reasons.
Right. I think that all follows to me. And I think, because he's got this sense when he comes back, it's this whole idea of something has happened in the world that I caused, and like it cannot be set right again. I have ruined it with this sort of innate flaw.
It's very, and I don't know if it's because I'm just reading Paradise Lost, it's very Garden of Eden, first original sin coded.
Well, that's something I almost meant to bring up earlier. The other thing about the gods not being literal people walking around, although this is not like Paradise Lost, because God is that and in the book of Genesis, but it is a very contemporary Christian way of thinking about the relationship to the Greek pantheon.
Yeah.
The way he portrays the gods in this movie is the way that modern audiences who are more familiar with Christianity can relate to that.
Can you elaborate on that?
If something happens, maybe it's Poseidon who willed it, but Poseidon didn't show up and do it.
Okay. So the whole like off-screen presence kind of feeling.
Yeah. It feels more like faith, which is a word that's mainly important to Christians, not, other world religions. It feels more like faith than it does like the gods are a fact of life that scheme and interfere and everything. So they're almost a stand-in for Christian belief.
You are not the first person to bring that up to me, and I can see that. It's not the interpretation I necessarily go for. If it is true, it feels like an unconsciously chosen option. Because I just feel like Christopher Nolan was aiming for a more grounded feeling. And because our society is grounded in the way it is in an off-present Christian God for a modern American audience, that's what it comes across as.
I think that's fair. But all of this talk about the trick and sort of the ultimate flaw and, ruining Greek society brings me to want to talk about the ending scenes where he shows up to the suitors and kills them. My thought as I watched it, and even now, was...
This is awesome.
Yeah, this rules. But on reflection, I'm like, is it kind of incoherent because we get these themes of you should not dress up falsely and then attack a bunch of people and kill them. And then that's exactly how he resolves the ending of the story.
This ties into what he's talking with Telemachus about. And also I feel like maybe ties a little bit into kind of original sin and being forever damned. He tells Telemachus that only Odysseus himself can kill any of the suitors because it's a grave sin to kill someone who is the guest.
Right.
And that's not how it ends in the book. Athena goes with them. Three of them murder all the guests. And in this one, it's just Odysseus. Because Odysseus' plan is, I'm going to kill all these people. I'm going to bear the brunt of the law and be exiled. And Telemachus can be an innocent, unsinned king.
So this is sort of the last act of treachery and ruination that has to happen before I can pass on things to the next generation who I hope will do better than me.
Yeah, it's a continuation for how he's acted throughout this entire thing, which is, I'm going to do a very, very shitty thing that's going to damage my soul, and I'm not going to be able to recover from it, but I'm going to do it for good reasons. I think it falls flat because Telemachus does murder somebody.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can get there thematically and intellectually, but watching the movie is also making an argument visually, and the argument it's making is, this fucking rocks, let's kill those guys.
Honestly, it's up there with the Kingsman Church massacre scene in terms of like how I just enjoy watching it.
It was, he became John Wick for, 10 minutes.
He's got like 20 arrows in him.
Fun.
He's like switching weapons as they get dropped down through the floor. It is very, very, very cool. And it is a lot more brutal because he's getting damaged, because that doesn't happen in the original poem. In the original poem, Athena's like, not going to hurt my big boy. And it just makes him feel so much more impressive and so much more of a threat because he's just enduring all this shit and just getting curb stomped. And it's very similar to how certain comics characterize Darth Vader, as Darth Vader's not a person who is never beaten. He's a person who will get back up after you've kicked his ass and will just proceed to keep coming and keep coming. And like that's where the terror is. And he's this legend from the Trojan War. He seems like he's unkillable because they've shot 20 arrows into him and he keeps coming. And it's just awesome.
Yeah. Again, it's a situation where Athena probably is technically helping him in the text of the movie because of the way it's made. It's more of the suggestion rather than the explicit, yes, that's what happened. Yeah, it's such a fun scene and so satisfying in the moment. I just think it's one of those things where it's a fridge logic thing where it's like 2 hours later, you're opening your fridge and you're like, wait a second, it shouldn't have been good that he killed all those dudes. It did remind me in a way though of, I've brought this up when we covered Cormac McCarthy directly with No Country for Old Men, but again, it made me think of The Road because, and actually this makes me think like maybe reading The Road within the lens of what is this taking from the Odyssey could be enlightened, but I'm not going to do that, at least not right now. But it's about a father and a son who are journeying, and the father throughout the story, because it's this post-apocalyptic world, and again, there's like flashbacks to, there are the things I did wrong, men have led us here, but he's constantly self-preserving and saying, got to kill those guys before they kill us, we can't help those strangers because they could kill us, and his son is always the first to try and reach out to people, and it ends with sort of giving my son over to this group of strangers that seem to have formed a commune, and I have to leave, like I can't be a part of this world. It's like he has this like cynicism and this necessary individualism, but he knows that the future of the world needs to be up to next generation, his son, who is more open and kind. It really felt like it was playing with some of the same themes with, well, Odysseus has to sort of do these things because he wouldn't make it home, and sort of the law of the universe would not be set right if he doesn't make it home and reunite with Penelope. But ultimately, things need to be given over to his son, who politely suffered through 20 years of people invading his home.
I think the implication was that like it was only recently, like it was in the last like 3 or 5 years that they started coming in trying to marry Penelope, not all 20 years.
I feel like in the poem it's definitely happening for a long, long time, but maybe I'm wrong.
In the poem, it would only begin after the Greeks started returning from the Trojan War, because everyone would just assume that, oh, he's coming back. It's only after his return is in question they would start thinking, okay, maybe I can marry Penelope.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, my overall point is I just think it's an interesting theme that both of those works are playing around with, and they're both sort of father-son stories. Obviously the Odyssey is the literal Odyssey, so it's hard to get a more direct like father and son adventure story than that, but The Road also, has shades of it, I think, that are very similar.
Also in kind of parallel with Paradise Lost is them leaving and traveling west.
Is that where the Hobbits go?
The Hobbits go west.
The Hobbits go west?
Because that's where Paradise is. That's where Valinor is.
So Tolkien almost certainly got that from Paradise Lost.
Yes.
And then Nolan either got it from Paradise Lost or The Hobbits.
Yeah. It's interesting because normally in a lot of universes or creative universes, if things are like antithetical to each other on the maps, where like the good guys are in the north and the bad guys are in the south or whatever, in Tolkien, it's like the good guys are in the west and the bad guys are in the north, and then they slowly move south into the east. And so there's some thought I have about that. Not that it's relevant here. I found it interesting that originally they're in the north.
I'm becoming more and more convinced that I want to cover Lord of the Rings sooner than later.
Okay.
That'll be a doozy.
I can't wait for a 10-hour conversation about why Tom Bombadil should have still been in the movie.
Okay, we're going to go on a tangent here. Have you heard that Stephen Colbert is writing the screenplay just to turn the one chapter that Tom Bombadil is in into a movie?
I knew he was writing the screenplay. I didn't know that was his only reason for wanting to do it. I respect it.
No, like he says there's this like one paragraph that implies this like amazing movie that he's always wanted to write. And so he like pitched it to the execs. And that paragraph is in the Tom Bombadil chapter.
I have to imagine it's when Tom Bombadil says, like, this ring doesn't mean anything to me. I've been here since before the trees were here.
Yes, I think it is. But he will be on our screens, hopefully, within a decade. So
hopefully. I hope it's good.
Eumaeus in both the poem and the movie rules.
Yes. He honestly might be my favorite character.
In both?
In the movie.
Yes. He's played by John Leguizamo. Soon to be covered again by this podcast whenever we get around to the live-action Super Mario Brothers movie.
Ugh.
He is Luigi.
You think we'll see any,
as I know him,
parallels in character between those two?
Well, he's sort of like a long-suffering but loyal sidekick.
So, kind of, yeah.
Yeah. He's Mediterranean in nature.
Honestly, I thought all the cast was fairly good. And I was a little worried about some of them when I was saw them. Because I like Tom Holland. I think he's a decent actor. I don't think he's a great actor. I was a little worried about him in this movie, but I think he pulled it off well.
I think he does everything the movie asks of him, but honestly, I think this version of the story asks less of Telemachus than a more faithful one might. Like, he doesn't have as much of an arc.
Well, it feels so much that all of Telemachus' problems in the movie are like physical obstacles to overcome rather than societal or spiritual or...
Yeah, so much of what he might have had to deal with is sort of more offloaded thematically back onto Odysseus, I guess.
Yeah.
So he's just kind of helping the plot churn along at home, I guess.
I still think the funniest thing ever is when Tom Holland was like, I thought Christopher Nolan hated my acting because he would call cut every 3 minutes, not realizing that IMAX, that's how long you can do on an IMAX camera. And the series of tweets are being Tom Holland learns how film works on Odyssey.
Well, even normal film can run longer than 3 minutes. That's a very IMAX specific.
Yeah.
Now, my struggle with Eumaeus, as cool as he is that he throws a dog off a cliff within the first 5 minutes of the movie.
I think Christopher Nolan wanted to have something similar with the baby scene in the 300 movie. Just was a coward and just did dogs instead.
Well, when I was thinking about it, I was like, maybe this is sort of, because he does so many things to make the world feel more similar to ours, but this is sort of his this is a culture we cannot actually imagine. It's making it alien to us.
I guess it does tie into the themes surrounding power and dominance of women in the same way, because these are creatures that are seen as less than men. They can just be randomly decided, oh, you're not good enough, I can throw you off a cliff. Same way, oh, I could just kill you, I can pillage your city, I can rape you. I don't think that they're directly connected, but I think they both hint to the same kind of thematic core. And also might call into question, asking the audience to call into question of, is Odysseus and Penelope right when they're the Greek society is lost? Because this is who they were before. They're not that much better.
Right. Yeah, I was listening to a podcast where they speculated, they're trying to show the decay of Greek society. And I was like, no, this happens before Odysseus goes to war, which the movie supposedly is saying, is before the fall. So yeah, I think that's
Odysseus's desire when he's hunting to always strike his bow so that it makes a musical note so that the animal knows he's there, and that kind of honorableness. At the same time, he's also letting people throw dogs off cliffs and letting boys go to war.
I think it's kind of showing it's pointless to act like you're honorable if the next thing you're going to do is slaughter, kill, and eat that thing. You can keep up the appearances of honor, but then you are being deceitful and treacherous and all this stuff that is leading to this moral rot.
So it's another another one of those moments where the audience is supposed to question Odysseus as an honorable person.
I don't know. Because there's that scene where he's about to hunt and he's about to not do it, about to not play the chord, but then he kind of sighs and does it anyway. So are we supposed to think, oh, it is honorable, and now we're seeing an Odysseus who's gotten tired of, honorable behavior?
I think it's a common feeling to feel bogged down and kind of trapped by your morals, where it's annoying, it's not as effective, because it would be much more effective to just shoot the animal when they're not paying attention. And he's like, why can't I just do the smart thing, which is to be deceitful? And that's all wrapped up in his feelings about Troy.
Yes. We also have not talked about really Calypso. She kind of sandwiched in between where we left off and when we started talking about the ending. First thing I'll say, I think if any part of this movie bothers me visually, it is Calypso and her island.
Yeah.
It looks like a Dove soap commercial. It looks like I should go buy a fragrance called Sea Breeze after the movie.
It looks like Old Spice commercials. I can just imagine him being on a horse.
Look at your man, now look at me. I'm Odysseus. Now look at my horse.
And they combine it with the Land of the Lotus Eaters, which again is probably fair, because the Land of the Lotus Eaters is like maybe a couple lines, I think. Like it's not a very big thing.
Yes. I thought that was actually very clever storytelling wise to make it where, because in the book, he just sort of shacks up with Calypso and lets time slip by him, I guess.
Well, it's like time for gods and in holy places is not the same as time for men in menly places.
Yeah. So like there's this element of, well, he goes to the beach and cries each night, but also I don't think it's fair to say that Calypso is just like repeatedly assaulting him, because there's also a sense of just like, well, I found this island with this beautiful woman on it, so I'm going to stay here for a while. In the movie, she is feeding him lotus flower, which both changes his perception of time, like in the book, but also is making him forget about home entirely.
Well, that's like also just true for lotus flowers in general, right? Like that's the whole point.
I guess.
It makes them forget their home. In the NBC adaptation, the miniseries adaptation, the lotus flowers are given to them by Circe, and that's why they lose some time there, is that they forget their home. And Odysseus realizes and gets mad.
Yeah. And in the best interpretation of this concept, Percy Jackson gets stuck at a casino for 10 hours.
Honestly, I filter a lot of my knowledge of Greek mythology through what happened in Percy Jackson.
Well, I think that's probably true for everyone of a certain young enough age or of a certain generation we are part of.
Where was Lady Gaga's Poker Face being played in this theater? That's what this film was missing.
True. But yeah, I liked the screenwriting of those scenes. I was just like, she, of all the actors in this movie, just looks too modern.
Yeah.
And the way they costumed her did not help.
If you want to have a weird, inhuman, godly figure, I don't know, is Calypso supposed to be a goddess in this? Or is she just supposed to be like a regular person?
I don't know. And then the last kind of main adaptational thing wanting to make a note of is, I think it was very wise to sort of cast Robert Pattinson and make him the annoying sniveling suitor rather than try to split that role among more people.
Yeah, I mean,
even though it is in the poem.
That is pretty much always a stronger option when you're making a film based off something that's written. You just can't have that many characters and your audience care about them and they feel complete. So combining them or kind of centralizing them in one character tends to be a very effective method of conveying that. I was a little disappointed because I recall the trailer where him and Tom Holland kind of portrayed in vaguely homoerotic sexual tension, and there was just absolutely none of that in the film.
I can't say I remember that one, but I wasn't on the lookout for it, I'll say. So I saw someone pointing out that Robert Pattinson keeps taking roles where he gets to like mog Tom Holland and Timothée Chalamet.
Fair.
He does have that line early on where he's like, you just want your daddy or whatever. And apparently he gave an interview quote where he was like, Tom Holland was so annoyed with me on set because I kept going up to him and being like, I just want to be your daddy.
Well, Robert Pattinson is known for making bullshit up in interviews because he fucking hates them. So take everything he says with a grain of salt.
Well, I also saw some roundtable interview that was like him and Anne Hathaway and probably a couple other cast members. Him and Anne Hathaway just started joking about, what if I went to your room and saw the loom and I was just like, this is bullshit. It's not even a good loom. And they were like cracking up and the interviewer was like, let's move on, which seemed odd to me. I was like, if I was an interviewer, I would just let them rip.
No. Interviews are soulless corporate PR now, Josh. They don't have spirit anymore.
Robert Pattinson, come on, adaptive difficulty. We'll let you.
Can you imagine a podcast of our size just being, and Robert Pattinson be like, yeah, I want to join.
Yeah, no, I can't. I liked the score a lot. Apparently it was made with like all authentic Greek instruments. I thought it sounded surprisingly kind of techno techno and modern.
Maybe techno and modern just sounds like ancient Greece.
Mind blown. I thought it was a very good movie. I think I actually like it more now that we've talked it out quite a bit.
I definitely want to go see it again. Talked it with several people here, and I just talked about it with you. I just want to see it again because I want to have processed all the information and then go see it again.
Right. My immediate feeling afterwards was like it was immediately entertaining, but enough stuff was different that it kind of bothered me and I didn't really see why. I think talking with you and also talking with my wife afterwards, it's shown me that there's more focus and thought put into the changes, and it's more like, yes, he's adding this theme of, the fall of Greek society and the moral decay, but he, in a way that's really layered throughout the entire movie in a very deliberate and smart way, where you can always take the change and find how it serves that, which I think is, if you're going to change something so dramatically, that's what you want to see, is that, every element of it was thought through to serve that happening.
How do we feel about this as being a metaphor for Christopher Nolan's life as a director?
People say this about Oppenheimer too, and I find it a little tedious because, you can explain it, and then I guess I don't want to insult you, and I don't think you're dumb if this is what you think. So you explain it and then tell me whether you believe it.
I mean, on some level, every artist puts a little bit of their own self into whatever role. I think trying to view Odysseus' character...
Well, I mean, can you explain what the metaphor would be? How does it map?
At the very most basic level, it's having to be pulled away from his family to go do movies for 2 or 3 years at a time, where he's kind of all consumed by this project and like what it means. And I don't really know if that holds water for me.
So on that element, I would say I do think there's some, because this is a theme Nolan constantly has. Interstellar, the guy has to leave his family to save the human race and find a habitable planet. Inception, his wife is dead and he wants to reconnect with his kid. So he constantly has these men who are pulled away from their wife and children for some quote unquote important reason, which maybe is directing blockbuster movies. The funny thing is that his wife is a coworker on all of his movies. So this does not actually happen to him. I think it's more of a fear of his.
Yeah, I think you can read probably all of his movies through that kind of lens, or at least most of his movies through that kind of lens. I just don't know if you're going to get a whole lot out of it. Like, I think comparing this to The Road, you could get a whole lot more out of, or comparing this to Paradise Lost, you could get a whole lot more out of than just being like, it's Christopher Nolan's life and his anxiety about his relationships and his relationship to work.
The part that I find tedious that I thought you were getting at is ever since Oppenheimer, people have been like, well, Oppenheimer is actually about how Christopher Nolan made the Batman movies and feels like he ruined cinema because now the MCU exists and is bad. Okay, honestly, I think Christopher Nolan is an emotionally mature enough man to not make a movie about the bombing of an entire city and equate it to how he feels about Marvel movies. But I don't think this movie will discourage anyone from thinking that, because again, it's playing with the same theme of I had to do something great but wrong, make Batman movies apparently, and now society is lost because Marvel exists.
Is the Trojan horse. The men from the sea are the MCU.
Kevin Feige is Antinous. The thing is that I think Christopher Nolan likes Marvel movies, if you actually listen to him in interviews, so the whole thing kind of falls apart.
Well, he was also like, he was talking about the back rooms recently. He was like, everyone always said that Gen Z or Gen Alpha can't sit there for like 20 minutes or whatever, and then they all saw the back rooms, and he's like, I always knew this was the case. You just have to make like interesting visuals and captivating films to get them to sit there and watch.
Kind of mogged him. He was like, my movies are popular, maybe you can't make them sit there for 3 hours. No, I think there's always going to be some anxiety, and I think that's where it comes in, is he has this fear of, I think he probably is such an obsessive worker that he has this fear of disconnecting from his wife and children, even if it hasn't actually happened in his life. I think he more is interested in the idea of the great men who have changed the world for the worse and the ramifications than he feels that he is one. Although, and I don't know a lot about this, so I can only say so much, did you know that he has a third brother that is a hitman who supposedly went by the codename Oppenheimer?
This sounds fake, Josh.
Let me Google this so I'm not just saying like some random...
This sounds absolutely fake.
Here we go. Let's see. Here's a fact check from Newsweek. In 2009, Matthew Nolan was arrested and charged with the murder of accountant Robert Cohen in Costa Rica.
He murdered one of the Cohen brothers?
No. It's spelled Cohen.
I can believe that his brother was responsible for a murder and maybe a hitman scenario. I think the most disbelievable thing is his nickname being Oppenheimer. Like, that feels like the kind of thing that someone says as a joke on Reddit afterwards, and then AI scrapes it, and then people respond to the AI and make a news article about it.
Now, this is a Newsweek article from 2023, so AI was around, but it was more primitive, and Newsweek definitely wasn't using it. Another man, Luis Alonso Douglas Mejia, was initially convicted of the murder, but the extradition documents point to Matthew Nolan's involvement as a hired killer, hired his services for an undetermined amount of money. It is not right to suggest he is a hitman or hired killer, as he has only been accused, not found guilty. That's a very...
Oh, no.
I have a podcast, so I'm allowed to say it. I'm not a journalist.
We're going to be sued for libel, Josh. Actually, it's slander. Actually, would it be libel?
There is apparently more evidence about the code name, because that actually comes up in the testimony.
Okay. When did Oppenheimer come out?
Oppenheimer came out like in 2023.
So he was like, yo, I just saw my brother's film. It was dope. Please call me Oppenheimer.
No. This all happened. Okay. A real human being was murdered, but this all happened in 2005.
Okay.
Yeah. So people think maybe that's where Nolan's somewhat newfound fascination with this subject has come from. Although in both Oppenheimer and the Odyssey, there's this sense of like maybe it had to be done, and I don't know. So that doesn't really track, I would hope.
He could be defending his brother. Who knows?
Yeah. His other brother, Jonathan, is just his coworker who sometimes co-writes his movies.
You have any more thoughts about the Odyssey?
I think I am good until next time, where we will finish our sort of read-along of the Odyssey with books
17 through 24.
We'll probably bring the movie back up, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Once we have some more context. Cameron may have seen it again by then. We'll see. We'll also just talk about any other adaptations we are curious on. This is really the first, and I don't know if I knew this when we planned to do multiple episodes on the Odyssey, but this is the first like true Hollywood adaptation that's just called the Odyssey and tries to do the story relatively straight. But there's like that miniseries, I guess. And
Ulysses 31.
Obviously there's all sorts of twisted versions that we can bring up. That's what we'll be doing next.
We have to rate it still.
Oh yeah. Okay. So do you remember what we said how difficult it is to turn the Odyssey into a movie in the last episode?
I feel like we said Yoshi, because I feel like we were too scared to say Kirby, but we were like, there's enough there. It feels very easy to kind of just put most of it just on the screen, just kind of straight as it comes.
I think it was like, it's hard to do all of the Odyssey, and no one would ever really try because it's so long. But the structure of the Odyssey is pretty easy to put on screen. It is the structure of adventures, basically. I think that this movie beat it. I don't know what else I would say, I guess.
Yeah, I feel a similar way in the sense that I think that it beat it. I will say, because of the changes, it almost feels like, and you're gonna have no context for this. It feels like the Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin edition, which is an updated version. Enemies are placed in different locations. Things are slightly changed. There's a slightly new ending. All the DLC is included. So it feels very much in that kind of vein where there's been deliberate changes. I don't want to say this is the definitive version of the Odyssey, because of course it's not. And I don't think there's any real definitive version of the Odyssey adaptation that would exist. In the same way that I think that there are maybe some definitive adaptations for other movies or for other books.
Right. Yeah, I guess it's like, the movie is very good and does take a lot directly from the Odyssey. So you can't say it's not faithfully adapting parts of the Odyssey. It is. Despite the movie being very good, I feel like there's still room, since it's never been done before, there's still room for a more straight down the line version of the Odyssey. And I think that would also be very interesting.
And that's why I say, like, I think it's like this updated version with some new content added. I don't say it completes it. I think there's still probably that room for doing it. I don't even know if I think doing a straight kind of run through of all of it would actually complete it in my mind. But I think that this one beats it very handily.
I think you could do a version that's sort of like this in how much of it adapts, but hews more closely to themes that are already in the text rather than adding its own. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And the reason I said Scholar of the First Sin is because it adds like a new ending, and it's like the definitive way to play Dark Souls 2, which is the best Dark Souls. I'll fight you all on that one.
And to be clear, the poem, The Odyssey, is the original Dark Souls 2 in this metaphor.
I guess that's true. Flawed, but beloved. The best Dark Souls. I'll fight you on it. Everyone hates it. You guys are just bad at the game.
Okay. Okay. And this makes the Aeneid Elden Ring?
Yes, because the Aeneid because Elden Ring is just Dark Souls 2, whereas like Dark Souls 3 is Dark Souls 1, 2, and Bloodborne is its own thing.
Right, yes. Bloodborne is the Divine Comedy.
I was actually going to say that I feel like Bloodborne is the Fairy Queen.
Okay. Sekiro is the movie Seven Samurai.
I was going to say Journey to the West.
Well, yeah,
I was thinking of other like major epic works of...
Yeah. Some of us can think of them faster than others. Demon Souls is the Iliad. Okay. So whatever happened between the Iliad and the Odyssey is Dark Souls.
Yeah. It's all those lost books that are like also like about the sequels and not just focused on Odysseus as a character, but focused on other people.
Oh, the other, yeah. There's a name for it, and there's like parts that are lost.
Yeah. It's like the Noel
like
story.
12, I think,
the Noel
total
story.
epics. Yeah. Something like. Okay, I'm glad we've covered this because this was important categorizational work.
Yeah.
If you have been enjoying our episode to this point, then please remember to rate us on whatever platform you are using. If you have any disagreements with us about Dark Souls, Christopher Nolan, on classical literature, please leave a comment, no matter how mad you are. Subscribe. We are available on YouTube, also Adaptive Difficulty there. We have a Blue Sky, which is at adaptivedifficulty.bsky.social, or you can email us at adaptivedifficultypod@gmail.com, and we would love to hear from you.
Thanks to everyone who made this podcast possible. Thanks to Christopher Nolan and all the hard-working actors for working on this adaptation. Thanks for making the world just a little bit more artful. Thanks to you guys, the listeners. It means so much to have you guys listen to us. Join us next time for when we continue the Odyssey with books 17 through 24.